Hello and welcome. I am doing another walkthrough video of some brand new software that has just come out within the last few days that I am very excited about. Eduardo Tarilonte's newest library, Celtic Era II. Now, I am a big fan of his stuff, as you guys all know, and we're going to dig into this one. I thought what I did in the last video when I actually just worked with it in composing instead of running through some patches was a lot more fun, and people seemed to like it. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick a few patches and just kind of sketch out some stuff, and we'll see what happens from there. I make no promises as to the quality of songwriting. This is really just a different way of demoing the sounds that he has in this library. I never really got into my setup of how I do this. So for those of you guys that are a little bit newer to DAWs or DAWs, digital audio workstations, they have way too many names for them. I'll just kind of give you an idea. We have, this is the mic channel on which I am speaking through right now. Then this is the loopback, which allows the sounds that I play to go to my video capture software so that everything that you hear can be heard. Otherwise, if I'm just hitting keys and no sound is coming through, that would not help anybody. So to do these videos, you have to have a sound card that has a loopback function. Otherwise, it will capture the video of what's playing in your DAW, but it will not capture the audio of it. It would still capture my microphone, so there's at least that. Now, here you can see by this icon right here, this is a Midi icon, so that is the Midi channel, which my physical keyboard controller will, when I hit a note, it goes here, and then that goes out to the instrument that I'm playing, and then that instrument comes back into Cakewalk as audio. This audio track we're not going to work with, but that would be if I decide to pursue the song. If I choose to do something with this later, I'll write all the tracks in MIDI, and then eventually I'll need to bounce them down to audio tracks so that I can mix them. But for our purposes today, this is just part of the template so that I don't have to add all that every time. I love working with templates. I have a bunch of different templates, one for Contact, one for Engine 2, which is what Eduardo's libraries use, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But I have one that's just my orchestra, and then I have a couple of varied other, like my electronic drum set has a template so that I can just pull that up and start playing and not have to sit here and set up all the same tracks every time. When you have an idea, you're creative, you're ready to go, you just want to be able to pull it up and start writing or pull it up and start playing. So I've got that. I've got a template that has my bass guitar ready to go, so I can just plug it in, and it's already got my algorithm of plugins set up so that I get the sound that I want. And maybe I just need to do a little modification if I want something different. So I'm a huge fan of templates. So the way that this works in routing so that I can get it to Engine is we'll take a look at the MIDI track 1. You can see here that the keyboard input, so this goes from my physical keyboard controller, is routed to my USB M Audio Key Station 88ES, and this is this here is so hard to do this sometimes. Slide over on the arrow, then it goes up to MIDI Omni, which means that it doesn't care what channel I'm playing on, it's going to accept it because I can only play on one channel at a time. And then that is routed down here to Engine, which is where Eduardo's samples are going to be located. And then this here is Engine MIDI channel 1. So anything that goes to whatever instrument I pick for MIDI channel 1, this MIDI track will be associated with that, and that's it. It won't be crossing over to other channels. Just a side note for people who use Contact, I use Contact for a lot of my other libraries. All of Eduardo's stuff goes in Engine. But for those of you that are using Contact from Native Instruments, sometimes what happens is there are instruments that are individual and there are other instruments that are grouped. And when you pick an instrument that's in a group, a lot of times your other MIDI tracks will have access to it, and the data that you play on that track, maybe you're playing a flute and it's a drum set that is your group, so you'll start getting drums hit on those same notes as the flute. It's really annoying. There's a real easy fix for that. I'll probably do another video on that at some point because it's really super easy, but it's just kind of handy to have. But anyway, we're working in Engine today, which is the most important part. So MIDI channel 1, if I go to track 2, now it just changes to Engine track 2, and so far down the line all the way up to 16. So let's take a look at Engine, because that's where we're mostly going to be working out of. So this is it, and right now there's nothing selected. I haven't loaded any patches. I thought we would do that as part of the video, as part of the challenge of just whatever patches I pick, I'm going to write with. And I tend to do that as a challenge sometimes, because when you write and you can pick nice patches, you can decide this is the kind of piece I want to write, and here's the sounds that I think would work for it. And you start working on it. Maybe you trade out a sound here or there. But if you just pick some random sounds and you say, I have to write something using these sounds, like that could be a fun challenge. And I find as composers, a lot of times I personally don't find that I'm challenged that much. I tend to write within the parameters of whatever it is I'm working on creating, or whatever idea I've come up with in the moment. So it's pretty fun to be able to just, challenge yourself now and then, and maybe you'll find some new level of writing, or new thing that you can come up with that you can use in a piece of music, whether it be for your personal use or public release, or for a film or video game. You just never know. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to add a layer. So this is going to be equal to our MIDI channel 1. This is channel 1, and it will, whatever I pick is going to be on channel 1. So whatever I play here and record there is always going to associate with channel 1 in Engine. So what we want to do here is we've picked a new layer, so that's a new MIDI channel, and then we're going to go here. And this brings up all the libraries and different things that I have within Engine that I can do. We're going to be working exclusively with Celtic Era II, because that is the new library. I'm wondering too, maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong, because I've always heard it as Celtic, but then I think the Boston Celtics are spelled the same, but it's Celtic with like an S sound instead of a hard C sound. So I don't know, but I'm pronouncing it Celtic Era because that's how I was taught to do it. And you can see that we have 6 different categories of sounds. We have ancient and some subcategories there. We have keyed, which is concertina is like a sort of accordion. We have percussion and some different percussion libraries there. We have soundscapes, and I've always been a huge fan of Eduardo's soundscapes. He comes up with some really brilliant and unique ideas, always plenty, and they're all, they're never thin sounding. They always are rich and huge and lush, and I love that. Sometimes you want something thin, and you can dial these back. You have some control over the sound as well. Whereas a lot of libraries, you're stuck with whatever they give you. So I really love the way that he gives you lots of options to work with. So then we have strings. We have some different libraries here within strings, and then of course winds. We have flutes and pipes. So let's pick a sound or two out of each one. We'll add layers as we go. Let's just go on down the line. We'll start with ancient. And as I've said many times before, I am not very worldly. I do not know a lot of culture, a lot of what the instruments are named or how they're pronounced. What I do a lot of times is I just look for a sound. And if I like the sound, or I think it's going to fit whatever piece I'm working on, I'll add that. I might delete it later if it's one that I don't think really particularly fits what I'm trying to do, or I can't work it in. So right here, we're going to start with ancient, and we're going to go with, I don't know how this is pronounced. I'm going to guess it's pronounced Dord. I'm hoping so. So once you see this, you can tell that it's loaded. You have the word Dord here, so you can see that it's fully loaded. It's not in the process of loading that sound in. And we have another absolutely beautiful, very zen looking interface from Eduardo on here that just makes this even a bigger joy to work with. Like, it's not enough that the sounds are always amazing in his libraries, but he gives us these beautiful interfaces to work with. My favorite one, this I really love too. My favorite one might still be Nada, because I just love that zen meditation look to it, and that's a library I work with a lot. But this is really cool too. I absolutely love this. It's a really interesting looking tree. Yeah, this is really cool. So right here you can see that it is a legato. There is a mod wheel volume. We have a volume controller here. We have a vibrato volume controller, and we have vibrato speed. So we have some things that we can do to manipulate the sound, make it fit what we're trying to do. We don't just have what's out of the box. Then of course we have the volume and the panning over here, which is very important, and effects over here, exertion and reverb. Very cool. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about the instrument, you can just click on this little info button. You get a picture of what it looks like and a little bit of information on it. And I love the depths of just information that Eduardo gives you. You don't get that with a lot of libraries. Honestly, you don't, or they're so minimal or hard to read. This is in big lettering. It's very clear. Still loving this green. Yeah, really cool. So over here we have some different things that we can do with the sound that give you, different attenuations to the sound. For our purposes today, because I could make this video 17 hours long, we're just going to use the basic stock setup. And once you get the library, you can experiment with it all you like. It's really, there's always really good options. And let's just hear the bass sound without the reverb first so we can hear what the recording is. You wouldn't think an instrument that looks that thin would make such a thick sound, but it actually does. That's really nice. Now let's hear it with the intended reverb. Oh, that's just gorgeous. Okay, so we're gonna add that for sure. So this is the DORD. So what I do is, so I know what track is what over here in my DAW, which by the way, I use Cakewalk by BandLab. It is absolutely free. It is a brilliant program. I've been using it for well over 20 years now. I think I switched over to digital in like 99 I started, or 98, somewhere in there. It was shortly after I moved to Phoenix, so I'd have to check back and see where that was, but it was somewhere around 98 or 99. And wish I had done it years ago. I think the version of Cakewalk that I was working on was Cakewalk like 4.2, and that was when it was still owned by 12 Tone Systems. It's changed hands a couple times since then. BandLab has purchased it. They've made it absolutely free because it's a huge passion project for them. They are amazing with updates. They're doing bug fixes and things all the time. I know they've got a lot of plans for it going forwards, but they have just been absolutely amazing to work with. I've met them a couple times at the NAMM show. Wonderful people on top of all that. But it is free. It's been promised it will always be free. And that is just awesome. So here I'm going to go ahead and type in the name. And now I know that, should I remember what that instrument is? Because like once you get a bunch of instruments in and they're not ones that you're familiar with, it takes you a while to associate the names, but there I have it there. I also typically have an external spreadsheet patch list where I will notate what that instrument is and what sound it is so that I can just have kind of a quick reference. Oh yeah, this is the one that, sounds kind of like a saxophone, but it's not. Just some things so that I can go right to it. And the more tracks that you get into like 30 plus tracks, it really helps to have some kind of guide. At least it helps me. So that's something that you can do. I think I did that in one of my other videos. So we're going to start with that. We'll pick that as our first instrument. Now we're going to add another layer. So we'll have another instrument. We'll go back right here to pick a sound, back to Celtic Era II, and let's go into keyed. There we go. Concertina. Nice little, sort of I always picture it, and I know it's not always used this way, but I always picture it as like a carnival when you see the monkey playing the little accordion. It looks like this right here. This one's kind of harder to see because it's in the brighter green, but it's just like that. It's just that one piece thing, and instead of the accordion where you only move it with one hand, you're basically kind of moving it, I think, with both and opening it up and closing it. I've never played one, so I'm not very familiar with all the ins and outs. But for me to be able to hear this instrument, now I have to go to my MIDI channel 2 in Cakewalk, and now I can hear what the concertina does. Now, if you notice, you can even hear the key clicks. So that's really authentic. Like a lot of virtual instruments, what they'll do is they'll cut that out or they'll shape the sound so that you don't hear the actual physical part of the playing. But sometimes you'll find libraries that actually mic the hand side of the instrument as well as the sound that's coming out of it. And I like that because that's definitely more authentic. You're getting the real instrument. Some of them I think might even go as far as to not record it but simulate it after. But I like when it's natural. I know how Eduardo records, so I know that he would have absolutely mic'd this. But it's really cool. Okay, so we're going to add the concertina as our second track. Now, I'm really paranoid about saving things, so I'm just going to do a quick save. And there you are. And now we're going to add another layer, and we'll pick another sound. Whoops. And since there's only concertinas, I don't think we need to pick another one of those. We can go to percussion, and let's go with the bass drum. Nice simple bass drum. And these patches are loading very quick, by the way. So most of us, I think, know one way or another what a bass drum is. His are not like the, your standard rock and roll bass drums, but the point of it is still the same. So we're going to go bass drum, and let's hear it. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so what we've got here are the individual hits, right, in this white section. Then over in the green section, we've got the rolls. And you can see what keys they're referencing, which sounds that they're using to make that combination. So I don't know how he programs that in the background. They're not individual samples. It looks like it might be like a little MIDI algorithm or something that works with the tempo syncs to your project. I'm not sure, but in any case, that can save you a little bit of time if you don't want to program all those rolls and stuff yourself. And if they're on one, if he's using sounds from one key, which it looks like he is, those can be really difficult to program because you can't just, it's a lot easier to do a roll when you can do it off of two different keys. Off of one key can be a little challenging to get the timing right. So I like that. That's really cool. And then we'll pick, I don't know, we'll pick another one from Percussion, I think would be good. So we'll add another layer. And maybe we'll do some toms. Let's see what that's all about. Oops, right octave would help, wouldn't it? Oh, good. It's got a nice feel to it. I like that. So we'll go with the toms. And obviously there are plenty of other instruments within, percussion as well that you can choose from. I'm just doing this kind of on a minimalist, I can't say it, but I can do it, minimalist way of doing things just for our purposes here. So in soundscapes, he's got a ton of great stuff. I'm going to come back to that one, and we're going to skip ahead to strings. We've got some cool stuff here. An acoustic guitar. This is my sloppy hand because my hand is at an angle, so I tend to go up, and it takes me up into soundscapes instead of across in strings. So you can always tell that there's more sounds, that this is a library that's a category with a subcategory if there's an arrow next to it. So here we can see, like, we have a fingered acoustic guitar, a plucked acoustic guitar, and then one that's strummed has more options. You see that arrow, that means that there's another library to go to there. So we've got some good stuff. We've got harps, a zither, a fiddle. Fiddles are always nice to have. So I'll just pick a nice little fiddle. We'll see what it sounds like in a minute, but I'm just going for it. I'm wild and crazy like that, as you can tell. Now this one must be a much bigger sample, so it's taking a little bit longer to load, but it will load. And while we're doing that, I can say fiddle. I love the tree on this side too. Like, it has a different feel to it, even though the shading and everything is the same. It's like it doesn't have that green background, so it just gives you a different flavor of it with a different color background. That's pretty cool. So let's see what the fiddle sounds like. Very nice. Again, absolutely gorgeous reverb. So we're going to add another layer. And our next layer, got a couple more categories to go here. So we have wind, we have flute, and pipes. So let's see here. Got some good flutes there. Irish whistles are always nice to have, but I'm feeling a little bit more experimental today. Uilleann pipes, I've always loved those. They can be absolutely rich and huge, but I want to go with something I don't know because I'm like I said, I'm feeling a little experimental. So we'll go with the Gaida, G-A-I-D-A. I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced. Again, not a world travel-y guy, but it looks like a small bagpipe. So we will see how that sounds here in just a second. And now I was typing here, but I go back up to the MIDI channel because if you're transmitting on the audio channel, you're not sending MIDI data anywhere. It will probably pick the last sound that you were using, and we don't want to hear the fiddle again. We want to hear what this sounds like. So we'll check it out. Okay, I didn't want to do that, but that's good to know that that's available. good sound. It's not as huge as like a full set of bagpipes, but I like that. I like that it's a little more minimum. I there used to be a guy here in Vegas that when I was walking down the strip, I would hear him play a set of bagpipes every once in a while, and I'm like, God, that's such a beautiful sound, but it's like too big. And if you're anywhere near him, like if you're across the street, it's not bad. If you're anywhere near it, even with earplugs on, I found that it was a little bit just too much for my ears. So I'm not a huge fan of that that volume of them. But the sound themselves, if they're blended well, can be very nice. Or if they're played solo, but at a at a volume that's appropriate or at a distance. I just find that there's some kind of ear piercing frequencies in there that kind of drive me a little bit nuts. So that is that. And I think we'll add one more layer because we have one more category here that I skipped over earlier. And that is soundscapes. Back to Era II and soundscapes. So he's got some cool stuff. I'm just going to play a couple of these because I thought they were super cool. But we're not necessarily going to use them. This one is Burial Mound. I love that. I love the long decay. But you have some controls here. This is what I was talking about earlier, where you have some control over the sounds. Let's hear that. But let's say that you wanted to hear what it was like without the bell. Let's say I really like that sound, but I don't want a bell right now. Or I have I have one where I use the bell and then maybe I put it on another channel and use it twice, and the other one has a bell. Okay, pretty cool. Now let's put the bell back in and we'll take out, and you also have the degree, like how much of the bell that you want. Maybe you just want a subtle bell or maybe you want a louder bell. And let's try it without the wind pad. Right, completely different feel to it. And now we'll try it without the low pad. So you have all kinds of things that you can do with it, which is really super cool. I absolutely love that. But let's say that's not what we want. So what we can do is we can use the up and down arrow to go to the next one. We could do it that way. Or if there's a certain one we want to try, we just go back into Celtic Era II. It tells us which one we're already set to right here because it's got the check mark. And so I forwarded it to Celtic Adventure 2. But let's pick something else. Let's pick Beautiful Horizon and see what that sounds like. And again, you'll know it's switched over when the name pops up. That's when it's loaded. Very nice. And if we want to switch that out with something else. Oh, I checked this one out earlier. This fairy harp is really cool. Fae is a term for fairy, by the way, for people that are too lazy to say fairy. Really kind of like a harp and a pad feel to it. Really like that. That's a really nice. Not quite what I'm thinking for this though. Let's see, Through the Mist. That's an interesting title. And the one thing that's different when you have instruments, if you're familiar with the instruments, you kind of know, like a bass drum. Okay, I know I want a bass drum, so you go to bass drum, boom, you pull it up. Is this the bass drum I want, or are there multiple options? You can narrow it down. When it comes to soundscapes, it's really tough because what does Through the Mist sound like? Why would I know to go immediately to Through the Mist, right? I have no idea. So with soundscapes and pads, you kind of have to play with those a little bit, and you just have to listen to them and see what you like and if it's going to fit your project, because there's no way to know by the title unless it were to say pad 1 and pad 2. That wouldn't tell you anything. But let's say it was like bell and harp. You can kind of have some idea of what that might be like, but you would get whatever they name it. So with pads and soundscapes, you kind of have to just listen to them to see what you've really got and get to know them that way. So that sounds like a synth pad and some cicada bugs, right? But I don't know which pad does what. So here you can just figure out by experimentation. Okay, so pad 1 is that sort of cicada sound, and pad 2 that's beautiful. And you could even have like a mellower amount. So you still get that sound, but not so much of it, or you could have it dominate if you wanted to. However you want to do it is fine. One thing that I found is helpful if I want them to be independent. You know, like maybe I like what I played and I want them both, but I want to have independent control. Like I want a certain effect, like maybe just the reverb on the pad, but on the cicada sound, I want like a little bit of a flange maybe. So what you can do is you can take your MIDI track after you write it, because obviously you can't do it before you write it. You write the track and then you duplicate that to another MIDI channel, and then you add another instance of this sound. And what you get then is that on the track, then you adjust the pad so that you only have that cicada sound, and you put your flange on it. So you don't have to record the performance twice. You can use the same performance because you want the same notes, but then you have that independence of the two different types of articulations of this particular patch. So I really like that. Also, you can see where it says Through the Mist up here underneath the name of Celtic Era II. As I move this up and down, it gives you a nice read of the percentage. It's not really tiny. Like a lot of the libraries, they'll put it down here and it'll be really tiny and hard to read. But you can actually just read it right up here, which is really nice. I like that. And then as soon as you move it off, it goes right back to the name of the patch. So that is super cool. But again, not quite what I'm thinking for this piece. So let's go and find something. Let's try... We did Horizon, didn't we? Let's do Land of Gods. And whatever this is, I have not heard this sound yet. Whatever it is, this is the one that we're going to work with. So take that. So lush sounding. Like his sounds are always so good. Now I'm curious though, because these are just some pads, I'm curious what he put in for info. We don't have anything there because again, it's just a soundscape. It's just a combination of layers of pads and whatever those pads were. Again, if you want to find out what each pad is, you can just you can kind of lower all the other ones and solo it. That's what that one does. You also have an individual sound right here, pan as well. So you can pan the entire instrument, or you can pan the individual instruments and get an individual sound. And he had everything set to pretty much the middle. Now, if I want to go back to how it sounded originally, I can just go back here and just reload it. And it takes it right back to it how it was when it loaded the first time. So any changes that you make to it, you're going to lose those. But that's kind of the point, right? You're just like, I just want to go back to the way it was designed and work with that. And that's what we have. So for channel 7 here, we want to go and add in Land of Gods. That doesn't sound like there's going to be a lot of fighting or anything there, does it? Okay, so we've got a few sounds that we're going to work with. We've got 7 tracks, and that we've covered all of the libraries, or all the sound banks, I should say, that are within this library. And we're going to go ahead and start writing. after I have a sip of coffee because that's good. I've learned through trial and error. I mean, something I honestly should have thought of in the beginning when I was podcasting. But I don't like paper straws or plastic straws. I think they're kind of wasteful. So I found on Etsy these wonderful glass straws that it turns out they're actually designed for like drug use or something. So that was news to me, but they're actually great for just being straws. So they're these really nice glass blown straws. They're fairly inexpensive. They have a bunch of different colors and lengths, and I use those now in my beverages instead of wasting plastic or paper straws. And the cool thing about that, or I should say, plastic straws with paper wrappers. But when you're podcasting or you're recording anything with voice, like if you're doing a voiceover, or reading an audiobook or whatever, the glass will cling against your coffee cup, teacup, whatever it is that you're drinking out of. And so that gets on the recording and you have to go in and take all that out, which can be a kind of a chore. So I don't use the straws when I'm recording, but I use them all the rest of the time. So follow me for more beverage podcasting and audio recording tips. I think that's the only one that I have. What song was it? On my Uriah Heep podcast, it was, I think it might have been Gypsy. Might have been the first one, like Gypsy, or one of the earlier ones off of Very Heavy, Very Humble. And I heard in the background there was like the clinking of a glass, and I had mentioned it to Mick, and he said, yeah, the singer, I think it was David Byron, had hoped that that wouldn't get on tape or something as he was getting to record the vocals, or maybe it was one of the backing singers when they were doing one of the backing tracks. I don't remember. But yeah, I thought that was kind of funny that it got into the recording. Very much like the remastered version of Nazareth's Love Hurts I have, where someone actually sneezes in the middle of the guitar solo, or coughs. It could be a sneeze or a cough. I can't really tell. But yeah, there's something in there that should not be in there, and it was not edited out. So that's kind of fun. I also just want to talk about this lower section right here where you see the keyboard visually. I use an 88 note semi-weighted keyboard. It is an M Audio keyboard, and I love that. I don't know how people do it with like a 49 key keyboard. I really like being able to just touch whatever notes I want. You can play full piano if you have like a drum set that covers the 88 keys, or percussion or whatever. You can get to everything. So I personally find the 49 keys limiting, but they are also they're great for travel, and they're great if you're on a budget. So I think at the time this one cost $199. They have way gone up in price since then. But yeah, this one, it's a great keyboard, and it was a steal. I've had it for a good 10 years now, and it's been very faithful, never let me down. I absolutely love it. And it has no sounds in it. It's just a controller, which is fine. But what you'll notice is that if I'm going to hit, let's say, C, you can see that the C I'm hitting also hits here. So you get the visual representation of what you're playing. And when you're working with sometimes like only certain octaves, it's good to just kind of be able to see that you're playing the right thing. Also, I use this all the time because I'll play something and not remember what I played. Like I'll just spontaneously play something and then I'll be like, what is that? And if you're playing on a pad, sometimes it's hard to decipher what the notes are. So you can't just go, oh, okay, well, I went from G to A to F or whatever. So it's nice to have that. As it plays back, you can actually see what you played, and then you can harmonize it, replicate it on another track, go an octave up, whatever you want to do. So let's start with the soundscape. That tends to be the easiest place. I'm just going to do a quick save here. That tends to be the easiest place to start. And from there, what we'll do is this. We record. And we should probably select a tempo too. That's usually helpful. I'm going to pick, we'll just go with 110. That's a nice, moderate tempo. So the track is armed. That means that anything that I play on the keyboard will record on that track. And here we go. Oh, well, it would help if I had my metronome, wouldn't it? I don't know why this template didn't have the metronome, but it didn't. Now it does. nice and simple, just going to keep everything in C. So that, you know, I don't get too crazy because we're just kind of sketching here. When I did this before, like I liked the idea that I had and I went back to it to start working on it, kind of lost the feel for it a little bit. So maybe someday I'll go back to that and it might have some more momentum and I'll write a song. Kind of like with this, like I just kind of sketching out how the library sounds, how it all works together. It's absolutely beautiful. The individual instruments, and there's a lot of reverb on here, which gives Eduardo's libraries a very nice sound. And you know, you can work with those reverbs. You have not just the turning the reverb on and off, but you've also got a level, so you can decide how much reverb goes to that sound as well. For the pad, I think I'm going to dial it back about halfway because all the individual instruments have reverb on them as well, so that might be a bit much. The other thing when you're working with pads is that pads don't always have an immediate attack. Like if you hit a drum, that has an immediate attack. A piano has an immediate attack. A flute does, and that can build depending on how you breathe into the flute. But with pads, a lot of times they have a little bit of like a warm-up period. So when you're transitioning from one chord to another, there's kind of that half second where it has to blend and the first sound is fading out while the other one's coming in. So that can sound a little bit weird sometimes. And that just goes to all pads if it doesn't have a fast attack. So like this one's just a really nice peaceful blend. So it's going to blend a little bit more slowly than some of the other ones, and that's absolutely fine. So let's go back now to the top. We'll go to our Dord, as it were. Now we don't have to switch Era. Era has everything in it. We're just looking at Land of the Gods, but we're actually sending back to channel 1, which is going to take us back to this Nord here. Let's see what happens, because I can't remember if you have to switch or not. Nope. However, where you have to be careful is this. So we're looking at Land of the Gods. We're listening to the Dord patch, right? I think I said Nord. That's a Hammond B3 individual keyboard. But if we wanted to make changes, like let's say I want to modify that sound, I want to change the panning or the level of reverb or something, you probably want to switch back to that just so that you don't mess up your other sound that you've got dialed in. So let's say I want to pan this a little bit to the left. I'm just going to move it over here. Right, there you go. Now here's where it gets a little tricky for me because my memory is not the greatest. I don't remember where I switched from C to D. And so one thing that you can do is you can just kind of drop it down and you can see, okay, I started in C. I know that it goes up here. So that's where I switched to D. Very simple. So now I want to go ahead and go back to my Dord track and I want to arm that one. Now it will play the Land of God sound through Engine while I'm recording on the Dord patch. So we'll get to hear what we played, which is very important. You know, if you had to play each instrument and not hear the previous instruments, you would make really shitty songs, and we're not going to do that. So we're going to go up here and see what I feel like playing. Love that decay. Okay, so now we've got a little bit of a solo over that. Very subtle, you know, nothing too crazy. Now, depending on how you want to write, because Eduardo does a lot of ethnic instruments, right? And a lot of them are wind instruments. So if you want to play with authenticity, you have to remember to ease up. You have to remember to give the player a spot to breathe. There are some instruments, I cannot for the life of me think of the name of it right now. I owned one. So I should be able to think of it, but there's certain instruments that require like circular breathing, which means that you can play a note for, didgeridoo, that's it. You could play a note for 20 minutes and you could hold your key down for 20 minutes and give an absolutely realistic performance. But for instruments like, you know, flute and brass instruments and a lot of the woodwinds, you have to, you know, to play authentically. And especially if you're writing for a real player, you have to remember to give them a little bit of room to breathe. So you can't just play straight through like I did here. You got to give them give them a beat to take a breath. Be kind to your musicians and they will be kind to you. or maybe not kind, but they will, I don't know, they'll show up. They won't roll their eyes when you offer them a gig. That's one thing that you can gain from that. So now I've gone back to the concertina. And again, if you go here to where the concertina is too, the other thing that you get to see is the note range. If you're, playing solo or you want to play some rhythms, it's good to know what notes you actually have available to you, because unlike like a regular sequencer or a regular synthesizer where you might have all 88 keys have a violin doesn't actually have all 88 notes. So if you're writing and you're using a virtual instrument, typically they're sampled to be real instruments, so you're not going to get notes that don't exist. So when you hire a live player, you can give them that score and say, hey, these are all notes you should be able to reach. Whereas if you write off of like a synthesizer, you could have the lowest note on the keyboard make a sound under a violin sound patch, but that isn't necessarily a sound a violin can actually play. And when you give it to your violinist, they're going to go, you don't know what you're doing, and now I'm going to double my rate to fix your score. So don't do that. So very important to know your note ranges if you're writing for live players, or even if you just want a realistic performance, because there are plenty of people in the audience that are classical musicians, ethnic players, and they know what ranges are realistic and which aren't. So if you're going for that authenticity, then it's really good to know how the instrument works, to where, like, it's a wind instrument, I know I need to let people breathe, or it's a percussive instrument, so I know I can do something with two hands. For example, I can hit two notes at the same time, whereas on a flute, you can't necessarily do that. So those things are good to know. But let's go ahead and record our concertina. I'm just going to move this window out of the way so I can see where that break is. Okay, it's at 11. And here we go. Okay, so obviously that was very loud. Now, normally what I would have done is I would have gone ahead and stopped it and found, a good proper volume. But we're going to go ahead and do this after the fact. Not too bad, right? But that means that our solo instrument now is a little bit too quiet, so I'm just going to add a little bit of volume to that. We'll probably lower the pad a little bit too, to kind of give it a little bit of room. That's a little bit more balanced. And let's check our bass drum, because that's up next. Okay, we'll have to see how it plays. It's nice and mellow, kind of where I like it. So let's go ahead and play the bass drum track. performance may have been a little bit sloppy, so there's a couple things that we can do. We can quantize it. So what I do a lot of times is I know that I want to quantize to eighth notes for this based on my performance. So I go one above that. I'm going to go to 16th notes, and then I'm going to go to eighth notes. And the reason that I do that is because if the performance isn't that smooth, that kind of just narrows it down. If I were to just go to 16th notes, the note might be too far away and it puts it on the next, or I'm sorry, eighth notes. It might go on the next eighth note instead of the previous one, or double up on them because it's not going to space them out where I want. If I just kind of narrow it down and just nudge them closer to where I want them to be, they're more likely to go to that correct spot. So I found that that really works. So if I want eighth notes, I'll do 16th and then eighth. And we'll just hear how that sounds in one of these sections here. Okay, so where does that leave us? Oh, that puts us in with the toms. Let me skip the toms for the moment, and let's go to the fiddle. That's down here, and that might be a little loud too. Oh, maybe not. Okay, and I don't want to start this at the beginning. I want to start it where it changes over to D. So what I'm going to do is just move it a measure before it starts. By the way, I always insert a blank measure or two at the very beginning of the song so that everything just has kind of a chance to sync up. If you start your song right on the first beat, sometimes when you convert it to audio, you'll get a little bit of a pop or a click. Sometimes the the instruments don't, like the effects and stuff, don't kick in right away. So I like to give it at least a measure or two to warm up. For some reason I picked 2 for this one. No rhyme or reason to that. I usually just do 1. But in any case, let's go ahead and add the fiddle. Well, I have to arm the track first, don't I? That would make sense. Okay, I see that I had done something here that I didn't mean to do. There's some sort of, this line right here should not be there. That's an automation line. I didn't program any automation. I must have done something by mistake when I was working on the template earlier. So I'm just going to get rid of that. And that's that. Now, I thought that the fiddle was a little bit quiet. So there's a couple things that we can do about that. Obviously, for one, we can raise the volume a little bit, and that we will. But first, what I think we should do is, I think since we've got 2 solo instruments, we should pan them a little bit differently. So let's go back to the Dord, and we're going to pan that a little bit more to the left, and then we're going to go over to the fiddle, and we'll pan that to the right, so they're kind of in opposing ears, and we'll see how we need to adjust the volumes. Bring a little bit more volume out of the fiddle if I lower the concertina a little bit. Oh, actually the Dord. So that's kind of shaping up, and this is typically how I do things a lot of times, is I'll kind of do a rough mix as I go so that I can really hear what the song is going to sound like once it's mixed, but also to save me the trouble of trying to balance it later. If I can't hear an instrument well enough when I'm playing, I can't write to harmonize it or counterpoint it or even work with it properly if I can't hear it. So I'll tend to do this panning in basic volumes while I'm going so that I can hear a nice clean mix. And you know, some instruments are brighter than others. Some instruments are brighter in certain ranges. Like a fiddle in a lower range is not going to be as loud as it is when it gets to the higher range. Those are the frequencies that are going to cut through a little bit more depending on what your background is. So background like a pad is usually going to be something that's a little bit middle or lower. Unless you're layering, you might do a harmony track, but you really just kind of want to thicken up the music with it. So it really helps me a lot of times to just kind of pan and do some volume work as I go. So that would be the fiddle, and that leaves us just the toms. Now let's see here. So we'll go to the toms, switch over. That's nice and quick. I like that. We've got some nice choices here, but mainly what we're going to do is we're going to stick in this section right here, which is, oh, well, it would help again if I got on the right track. Okay, so this is the range that we're working within here for the toms. And let's go back to the beginning of the song and just see what we got, see what we come up with. But first, I'm going to save it because, again, I'm paranoid about stuff like that. Here we go. Just like that. So, and by the way, I'm not claiming that this is going to be any kind of fantastic writing or whatever. Again, just kind of sketching out ideas as I go. May or may not ever turn into something. But now what we've got is we've got basically 7 tracks of music. Oh wait, no, we only did 6 because I haven't done this one yet. Oh, how could I forget about that? All right, let's remind ourselves what that sounds like because I honestly don't remember off the top of my head. Wow. Okay. God, it just sounds so bright. That's right. That's our bagpipes that I was bragging about, which are, I can already tell they're a little too loud. Okay. So maybe what we'll do is we'll pan these a little bit to the right, and we'll take the concertina and pan that a little bit to the left. And that will, again, kind of just open up that that 3D audio field. That's another thing that you can do. So there's volume, right, and how hard you hit the performance, but there's also panning. And panning can, you know, just moving those instruments to kind of their own spot in the audio field can help them cut through even more so sometimes than volume. So those are the 2 components to play with there so that you can hear everything. And again, like nothing's written in stone. So if I were to say, you know, finish this song, I'm not stuck to this. I can change these around and everything before or after I record the individual instruments and bouncing them to audio tracks. You have full mix control. But for now, just for the purposes of sketching, you want to be able to hear everything. So let's just lay something minimal down at the beginning with this one. Here we go. Oh, because I was looking at the wrong note range. See, it does make a difference to be on the right track. That's for sure. Because I was like up here when I should have been down here. See, that's what happens when you don't pay attention, Haskin. like lower note ranges that get a little bit harder to hear. So you can do a couple things. You can compress it. You can, raise the volume at that point. You can, just work on blending it. I did hit one note that was out of that range. So if I was, actually writing this as a track, I would probably just re-record that. But, we just have a basic idea now of what this, what this library can do, how easy the sounds work together. I mean, really, the only thing is your volumes. So you have your volume to taste. Certain instruments are always going to be a little bit louder. Fiddles, for example, in the higher range, they tend to cut through on a more ear-piercing frequency. So, you have to shape that a little bit sometimes. This actually sounds really good. I like it. But even just like this, with this instrument here that we're working with, the Gaeta, you can hear that it's not as loud in the lower frequencies. And that's the nature of the instrument. It's harder to push a lower frequency to have as much volume as it is a higher frequency. So, it works the way it works. So then you kind of shape your mix around there. Maybe you'll duck something down, like maybe you'll duck the accordion down or something like that to give room for that note. Or maybe that note doesn't necessarily need to be heard as much as it just does blend it in. Not every note needs to be heard specifically. A lot of times notes are just meant to be felt or added to thicken the audio. So, I mean, that's all songwriting stuff, though. You guys know how to do that. Or if you don't, there's a lot of opportunities for how to blend sounds to do different things. And me being the me that I am, I probably would duck something else down to make room for that note, even though it might be completely unnecessary. Or I might just do like a volume envelope to raise the volume for the end of that so that can, drag out as it transitions into the next part. All kinds of options for sure. But anyway, that should give you a basic idea of Celtic Era II by Eduardo Tarilonte. You can find this at Best Service. I'll put the links in the notes. A great company. I love working with them. I've met them at the NAMM show every year, except for this last one, unfortunately, in 2022. They weren't able to make it, which is certainly understandable. Right now travel is really expensive, and it's still kind of questionable what's the right thing to do as far as COVID and all that goes. So the nice thing is that you can download this online in the safety of your home without having to worry about any kind of illness. It just downloads right into multiple RAR files. You download them one at a time, and then you use your RAR expander to, you set the first one and it just grabs all the other ones. You just tell it where you want it to put the library and it'll take care of all that for you. Then there's also instructions too on how to authorize it and how to access that library through the engine thing, the engine library the first time. If you notice when you go to add layer and I go to pick a sound, it has all these libraries here, right, that I own. So what'll happen is it'll take you that won't be in there. So when I first downloaded Celtic Era II, Engine doesn't know it exists. So you have to go in and let Engine know that it exists, and then it'll go, okay, and then you load the library and it'll go, wait a minute, you need to authorize this, buddy. Actually, let me play a couple sounds, and then it went, wait a minute. And so then you just go online and you do you put in the code, and it tells you, okay, here's your return code. You put the return code in, authorized, good to go. It does take a little bit to download because it is a pretty huge library, and you have to manually download all 9 parts individually, which honestly, that's great, because a lot of times I find the bigger the download, the bigger chance that something's going to go wrong with one of the files. You won't know which one it is, and then you have to download the whole thing again. So I like that it's broken up into multiple parts. It's typically 9 with Eduardo, I've noticed. And then you just have all those RAR files together, and you decompress them into wherever you want them to go, and that's that. And then you just let Engine know, hey, this is where it is. So really cool. But yeah, I absolutely dig this library. It's right, the same quality with everything that I've heard him do. There's no, there's no loss. He didn't dial it in. Everything on here is absolutely exactly the way it should be. High quality, beautiful sound. The reverb is lush. It's an absolutely fantastic library. So once again, thank you, Eduardo. Congratulations to any of you guys who have an opportunity to pick this library up. Heavily, heavily worth it. So like I said, I will have the notes to Best Service. Now, if you're listening from around the world, they do have different Best Service sites depending on what country you're in. So I will have the link to the American one, And so you may just want to Google best service, like best service Eduardo or best service VST, and it'll take you to that best service page. You could probably also get to it through the US link and just change over to whichever one that you're from. I think there's a way to do that on their website. I used to only have the German link, so that's why I know that there at least was a way. Otherwise, just like I said, Google it, and you'll find it and save that in your favorites, because you'll probably be visiting their site often. They are a host to a ton of different companies. Eduardo is among them, but tons and tons of stuff. So check that out. Check out Eduardo's other libraries. Check out my videos. I've got a playlist going of all the videos I've done for Eduardo stuff. I've got some more to come. I just have to find some time as I'm working through other projects to get them recorded. But yeah, great stuff. Thank you guys for checking it out. And I will leave you with this crazy thing that I just whipped up off of the top of my head. Cheers. That song makes no sense.